Welcome to Curious Austrian Tours. Today's topic, Gothic Revival. The Gothic Revival was an architectural movement which originated in the mid to late 1700s in England. In the 1800s, increasingly studied neo-Gothic styles sought to revive medieval architectural styles, distinct from the classical styles prevalent at the time. The term Gothic Revival, sometimes also called Victorian Gothic, typically describes a period of full Gothic architecture observed in the second half of the 1800s. With the increase of Renaissance ideals, which included a strong distaste for everything created in the Middle Ages, Gothic architecture had become unfashionable by the 1600s. Many structures were consequently left unfinished or were gradually expanded throughout a long stretch of time. In England in the 1700s, nevertheless, the Gothic architectural style experienced a resurgence as a counter-response to the neoclassical movement. As in many of the early Gothic Revival buildings, the Gothic style was predominantly used for its romantic and charming characteristics, with no respect for its structural advocacy or original intended purpose. Beginning with Strawberry Hill, the quirky home of an English writer named Horace Walpole, the evocative architectural movement spread throughout the country. Walpole's country house at Strawberry Hill in Twickenham was a fancifully romantic Gothic cottage. The style then adopted by Walpole, called Strawberry Hill Gothic, took many of the decorative elements of exterior medieval Gothic architecture and moved them to the interior of the house. Hence, Walpole's rooms are decorated with styles such as crocketed arches and clasped ceilings. Very little of his style is what one would call authentic. Walpole just made embellishing touches and scattered them all around with abandon. The controversial result is very much open to criticism. You either love it or hate it. Just like Marmite, pun intended. But then, it is said, only a small number of people are unsure about it. Gothic Revival architecture, distinct from the original Gothic architecture, was utilized in various types of structures besides religious ones. Medieval elements were even incorporated into the facades of the conventional structures, or rather buildings. By the late 1800s, London was the epicenter of Gothic Revival architecture. It was backed by a strong cultural spread of medievalism, or more concise, by a strong fascination with works and relics from the medieval era. Literary works, interior decoration and such sometimes enjoyed and even pushed the Gothic Revival in architecture to a great degree. This architectural resurgence led to the completion of incomplete structures and to the construction of new ones in the style of Gothic Revival. You might wonder, literary works had such an influence on architecture at the time? Well, yes. One of the commonly recognized theories states that Gothic Revival was triggered by the widespread Romantic Revolution. As hinted before, it was the literary fascination in medieval times that produced Gothic tales and romances. By setting their stories in medieval times, authors such as our beloved Horace Walpole and particularly Scotsman Sir Walter Scott aided to establish a sense of nostalgia as well as interest in that era. The medieval castles as well as ruins portrayed in landscape paintings were a further sign of this mindset. The Gothic Revival was to remain one of the most compelling and long-lived of the 1800s revival styles, even if it began to lose influence after the beginning of the last quarter in this century. Structures such as houses of worship and institutions of higher learning were built in the Gothic Revival style in the United Kingdom and beyond until well into the 1900s. Let us take an even more in-depth look at today's subject matter. Many architects dabbled in the Gothic Revival style, but as with Walpole, it was more the decorative styles that appealed to them, little bits of awe-inspiring carving here, a touch of pointed arch there. As previously indicated in this video, most of these architects paid little attention to authentic proportion, which is one of the most compelling signatures of the authentic Gothic style. That is, even though when the shapes used by builders were Gothic, the structure in itself was not. Columns and piers were made with iron cores covered over with plaster. The Gothic Revival style is easy to distinguish from its original counterpart. One of the reasons was a lack of trained craftsmen to carry out the necessary work. original medieval building was time-consuming and labor-intensive. Still, there was a large pool of manual workers trained and experienced in the required techniques which were handed down through the generations. In the period of Gothic Revival, architects lacked exactly that pool of skilled labourers to draw upon. They were ultimately driven to develop methods of mass-producing decorative elements. These, no matter how well made they may have been, were too elegant, too flawless, and were short of the inherent roughness of original medieval architectural work. In the early 1800s, Gothic was considered more suitable for church and university buildings, where classical style was thought more appropriate for public and commercial buildings. It is only after 1840 that Gothic Revival began to gather steam, and when it did, the prime movers were not architects at all, but writers, philosophers, as well as social critics. A.W. Pugin, for instance, genuinely thought that the Middle Ages was a defining moment in human accomplishment and that Gothic architecture symbolized the ultimate combination of artistic and divine ideals. Then there were the supporters of the ecclesiological movement, which began in the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. They believed that only the Gothic style was appropriate for church architecture, but not just any Gothic style. In their eyes, the middle pointed or decorated style prevalent in the late 1200s to mid 1300s was the only true Gothic. Arguably, one of the greatest examples of authentic Gothic revival is the Palace of Westminster, also known as the Houses of Parliament. It was reconstructed by Sir Giles Barry and A.W. Pugin after a devastating fire destroyed the old buildings in 1834. While Barry oversaw the construction, much of the design is Pugin's, a design he carried out in rigorous perpendicular Gothic style inside and out. The period from 1855 to 1885 is known as High Victorian Gothic. Here, architects like William Butterfield, known for instance for Keble College Chapel, Oxford, and Sir George Gilbert Scott, the Albert Memorial in London, constructed a plethora of buildings in varying levels of adherence to the authentic Gothic style. High Victorian Gothic was utilised to a range of architectural endeavours. How do you make the difference between Gothic and Gothic Revival? You can start with time. Just to remember, roughly 1100s to 1400s is Gothic. 1700s to 1900s roughly is Gothic Revival. Then you can look at a place. Where is it? Again, roughly, every Gothic building outside of Europe is, as it is understood, Gothic Revival. But in Europe, you will find both architectural styles present. The next point you could look at is iron. Ironwork is absent in medieval Gothic buildings, but used in many Gothic Revival ones. And stone. Medieval Gothic stone looks much rougher and bumpier, but that is not easy to spot every time. So next time you bump, again, pun intended, into an assumingly Gothic Revival building, see for yourself if it is Gothic or Gothic Revival, and let us know in the comment section below. And the last point are buttresses. Now, the Gothic Revival buildings have smaller flying buttresses, sometimes even no buttresses, as innovative building techniques and materials making them unnecessary to support the weight of the structure. Besides the aforementioned Strawberry Hill House and the Houses of Parliament, a few other notable Gothic Revival structures in London would be St Pancras Railway Station. The station was designed by Sir William Henry Barlow in 1868. The red brick structure is far from a pure representation of Gothic architecture, but instead a historic Victorian structure that borrowed generously from Gothic aesthetic. Tower Bridge. A Tower Bridge is one of the later examples of Gothic Revival architecture in London. By the 1890s, architects were inspired by the success of earlier Gothic Revival monuments. The bridge was built between 1886 and 1894, designed by Horace Jones and engineered by John Wolfe Barry. Now let's go to the Albert Memorial in London. It was built in 1872 by Sir George Gilbert Scott. It was commissioned by Queen Victoria in memory of her beloved husband Prince Albert, who died in 1861. It is truly a lovely and exquisite piece of art. Let us look at some of other prominent structures in the style of Gothic Revival, continuing with the United Kingdom. You'd have the Barclay Church in Edinburgh, Scotland, which was built between the years of 1862 and 1864. The reference was made already to Sir Walter Scott Monument in Edinburgh, in Scotland, which was begun in 1841. Woodchester Mansion in Gloucestershire, built between 1858 and 1873. Tintersfield, Somerset, 1863. Scarisbrick Hall, Lancashire, 1836 and 1845. Manchester Town Hall in Manchester, 1877. Downside Abbey in Somerset, built between 1882 and 1925. John Rylands Library, Manchester, built between 1890 and 1900. And Wills Memorial Building at the University of Bristol in England, built between 1915 and 1925. Austria would have the Votivkirche, which is in Vienna, built between 1856 and 1879, and the Town Hall of Vienna, built between 1872 and 1883. Germany would have Cologne Cathedral. The first phase was from 1248 to 1473, and the towers were then built in a different style, in neo-Gothic style, from 1842 between 1880. Hungary, the Hungarian Parliament building in Budapest, 1885 till 1904 it was built. Czech Republic, St. Vitus Cathedral, Prague, built between 1870 and 1929. Now let's go further away, different continent altogether. The United States. St. Patrick's Cathedral, New York City, 1858 to 1878. The Woolworth Building, New York City, 1910 to 1913. Washington National Cathedral, Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, 1907 till 1990. Tribune Town, Chicago, Illinois, completed in 1925. And last but not least, some of the prominent Gothic Revival architects were George Frederick Bodley, Bertram Goodhue, David Bryce, William Burgess, Benjamin Ferry, George Edmund Street, Alexander Jackson Davis, Charles Clauder, Watson Fothergill, George Fellows Prynne, Sir Ninian Comper, William Butterfield, Ralph Adams Cram. Alright, that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching this video. I would highly appreciate if you like this video, watch my other videos, comment on them, and subscribe. In the meantime, cheerio!